This is Stephanie Glenn, your host. I am the Editorial Director at Data Science Central. I'd like to start our event off today by thanking Trifecta for sponsoring today's event. Trifecta is a long-time supporter of the Data Science Central community, and we're honoured to have them sponsoring our event today. Today's webinar is entitled Accelerate Analytics Projects with Data Prep on AWS, to be presented by Trifecta. Before we begin, I'd like to briefly review the format of today's webinar. Today's event will be 1 hour long. We have 3 presenters who I'll introduce in just a minute. There will be a 10 to 15 minute Q&A following the presentation. And this event is being recorded and will be available on datasciencecentral.com later this afternoon following today's live event. I'd also like to encourage our attendees to provide questions throughout the presentation. We will be reviewing and presenting them on your behalf during the Q&A portion of today's event. I'm very pleased to introduce today's speakers, Jacob Joseph and Samantha Winters, both with BA Products Co., and Matt Durder with Trifecta. Jacob Joseph is an Information Systems Manager at BA Products Co., and Technical Advisor and Solutions Architect at Insighter. He has architected, developed, and managed data management solutions in several industries, including healthcare, manufacturing, higher education, K-12, non-profits, entertainment, and retail. He received a Master of Professional Studies degree in Information Visualization in 2015 and specializes in sustainable data systems, systems integrations, extract, transform, load, ETL automation, and interactive web visualizations. Samantha Winters is a design and problem solver pushing the boundaries of data and information design, art, and science. Her research builds on work with the Hopkins Extreme Materials Institute, where she developed a process to quantify and visualize qualitative data as a tool to explore the connection between collaboration and discovery. Samantha is currently obtaining an MBA from Johns Hopkins University, is a graduate of the Maryland Institute College of Art Data Visualization Master's Program, holds a BFA in Graphic Design from Salisbury University, and has been practicing as a designer, creative director, and business strategist since 2005. More recently, Samantha has been leading strategic planning and business development for BA Products Co., as well as the HICO companies regarding data-driven projects such as annual reports for Standard & Poor's. Matt Durder is a customer marketing manager at Trifecta and is responsible for communication and strategy for Trifecta's global customer base. Prior to joining Trifecta, he was an analyst at PepsiCo, where he used Trifecta to report on customer supply chain data. Thanks for being with us today, Jacob, Samantha, and Matt. We're looking forward to your presentation. Leveraging the benefits of effective data preparation to help build a modern ERP system is a vital component in innovating an organization's data workflow systems. Complex pattern matching and parsing of unstructured data requires a great deal of time and effort, often utilizing labor-intensive hand coding. In today's Data Science Central webinar, you will learn how BA Products Co. has managed to cut 6 to 12 months process time of reformatting, restructuring, and preparing data down to only 2 months through automation and simplification. In today's webinar, you will understand technology trends that simplify your analytics modernization journey, Learn about the challenges and solutions that BA Products Co. use to solve their issues with legacy ERP systems. Learn how to accelerate time to value for analytics projects with data preparation on AWS. And see in action the before-after with the solution live demo. Jacob, Samantha, and Matt, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. You can begin as soon as you're ready to go.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Stephanie, for hosting, and thank you, BA Products, for being on with us today. I'm Matt Durda. I'm a customer marketing manager at Trifecta. As Stephanie mentioned, I've been with the company for 3 years. I started on our customer success team, working with a lot of our customers on implementing their solutions. And as Stephanie mentioned, I was a Trifecta user myself at Pepsi, and prepared my data for downstream consumption to visual reporting. So just to give everybody a quick understanding of the analytics space as it currently stands, I'm sure most people have probably heard this before, but there's a common phrase that the biggest challenge in accelerating data analytics is 80% of the time is cleaning and preparing the data, and then 20% is actually the analysis. And there's actually a quote we have from DJ Patel, who is the former chief data scientist for the United States under the Obama administration. And he said, it's impossible to overstress this, but 80% of the work in any data project is cleaning the data. And you may have also heard the joke, 80% of the time is spent cleaning the data, 20% of the time is spent complaining about cleaning the data. And that's a common problem that I think all organizations have, is taking the data from wherever it lives, whatever its source is, whether it's a database, a spreadsheet, log files, IoT sensors, apps, and getting it ready for the downstream consumption. And a lot of times through typical, legacy ELT processes or ELT, ETL, the data may be put in a warehouse or a database or lake, and it's not ready for the downstream consumption into the reporting or modeling. And that is the challenge that a lot of organizations face, is getting that data ready to consume, and they spend a lot of time doing it, and it impacts the entire team. So from the data analyst to the data engineer and data scientists, they're all impacted by the bottlenecks that this process creates of getting the data from point A to point B. And I've even talked to customers where they've mentioned that, when dealing with data, there might be spreadsheets that are housed on individual desktop computers that they have to somehow figure out how to get access to. And it can take months to just build a report, or a long time to turn around the data just to simply consume it. And the landscape is changing, and data is kind of the key, and you have to be you have to turn things around quickly to be proactive in your decision making, so that you can be effective in your business. And this is something that is being complicated by the rise of the machine learning and AI that is really common of what you're hearing about in the marketplace. And these are some articles from the Harvard Business Review and MIT Sloan, but you'll see that it's all over the place. And the idea is that data is where the business can compete, and it's win or lose. That data is the real differentiator and is now becoming commonplace, and that's probably why you're on the webinar today. And the bottom line is, you need good data just to run the business, and much less do AI or ML. You need your data clean and prepared and ready to go. And there's been an evolution in data preparation from traditional coding, and you had to be well versed in a coding language, to ETL mapping, and now finally data preparation, which we're going to show is very much in Trifecta visual and more of a point and click, and much more geared towards data that you're unfamiliar with, so you can easily explore and profile the data. And we're seeing this evolution of analytics and data management going from IT-led to business-led. IT spent a lot of overhead preparing data for the business to use, and we're seeing a shift of the data becoming available and being more self-service for the business. And we're seeing a difference in the transactions, the behaviors, the data that is received, a lot more streaming data and IoT data that wasn't being used previously that is now a part of everyday reporting. And we're seeing a shift in the platform from being on-premise servers to a hybrid or cloud. Cloud is the big topic that's everybody's talking about now, and we're seeing a huge shift in the market of customers leveraging cloud platforms like AWS and Azure. And it's becoming a top-down, it's gone from top-down to being iterative and collaborative. What used to be a contentious relationship between IT and business is now more collaborative than it ever was before. And this is really helping organizations make progress in their analytics initiatives. And a lot of the cloud leaders are recognizing data preparation as a critical role. And you can see here we've got all of the major players in the cloud and data lake landscape that are investing into data preparation. So what to do? Trifecta empowers the domain experts with intelligent visual interfaces that automate and assess the transformation of data. Basically, they see their data while transforming it. And it enables IT to collaboratively curate and operationalize data pipelines authored by those domain experts. And it finally establishes an enterprise-wide platform that defines data from a variety of sources, supporting a range of users and use cases. So we reduce that bottleneck that happens from the prep time for downstream consumption. So, and these are some of our customers that are utilizing Trifecta to make this process of taking the data from its source to its downstream consumption quicker. And how does Trifecta do that? We say we do that through self-service speed and that we're cloud native. So no matter what cloud platform you're on, Trifecta can integrate with it. Self-service as it's intuitive and a visual interface, and it's got self-documenting lineage, which we call a recipe. So whether or not you're seeing data for the first time, you get a visual profile of what's in that data, or if you're the domain expert, you can easily see and transform your data in real time. And you're still maintaining the governance and lineage, which is critical to IT. And speed, you get instant previews. Trifecta works within the Chrome browser. And so the user is actually interacting with data in real time. And when you click on something, you get ML-driven suggestions. So, and I'll show this in a demo later on, but when you select a piece of your data, Trifecta will actually ask, do you want to do this with your data, or assume what you're trying to accomplish? And then you can either put that into place or edit it, and you can quickly prepare your data so that you can get to that downstream consumption much, much faster. And then you can also automate those data pipelines through scheduling features, and it's much more collaborative to share, test, and version control with others within your organization so that you can get those workflows into a productionalized state much faster than you could before. And we're seeing this across many organizations. They're retiring legacy solutions and moving everything to the cloud and modernizing their technology stack. And no matter what cloud you're using, Trifecta will integrate and mirror the governance and security that's already in place. We natively integrate with all of the cloud providers. So Google Cloud, if you go use Google Cloud Data Prep right now, that's actually Trifecta. You're using Trifecta. AWS, we're available on the marketplace, and you can install directly AWS and utilize your S3 storage or Redshift. And then Microsoft Azure, same thing. And we are constantly ranked #1 across all of the industry analysts. So with Gartner, Forrester, and Bloor and Dresner. And so we pride ourselves in focusing on data preparation and being the best of breed in that technology space. And just real quick before I turn things over to BA Products to tell you a little bit about their story, just wanted to give you a couple quick points on how to get started with Trifecta. So we've got 3 different products: Trifecta Wrangler, which is free for individuals, and there is some limitations to file size that you can use. And then we do have a Pro and a Enterprise version as well, and you can find out more information on trifectacom. We also have, we're available on the AWS Marketplace as well. So if you're using AWS, you can install directly from the Marketplace. And then if you want to start wrangling, just go to trifectacom and you'll see right in the upper right-hand corner of the website, free Wrangler. And before we turn over to BA Products, we do have a quick polling question. Based on the audience who's attended today, we just wanted to get some insights into what persona would best describe your current position. And you can click directly on the screen whether you're an IT professional, data scientist, business analyst, or other. So we already got some responses, so we'll give everybody a few quick seconds to respond. All right, so far the data scientists are in the lead. So hopefully you're on here because you are spending a lot of time preparing your data, probably for your modeling. And hopefully you'll learn a few more things as we go through the rest of the presentation. All right, a lot of data scientists, and that's kind of, we kind of got a split audience right down the middle. A lot of business analysts, IT professionals. This is great. All right. So yeah, it's across the board. So hopefully this resonates with all of you. And then with that, I'm going to turn it over to Samantha and Jacob from BA Products to tell you a little bit about their journey with Trifecta and data preparation.
Great. Thank you, Matt. So we wanted to start by giving you an idea of who we are. BA is an automotive manufacturing company, and our mission statement is that we believe in a framework where safety and prosperity can coexist through research, knowledge, and application of new ideas and technologies. We aim to continuously improve the livelihood of people impacted by transportation every day. That was important for us to read to you because safety is really behind a lot of what we do, the products we create, and the people we serve. And so getting our information in order, having it readily accessible, like Matt was explaining, was imperative to our mission as a company to provide safe products. So we've been around for about 40 years, a little more, and in the past 10 years, we've grown about 10 times the size that we were 10 years ago. But in that period of time, we've maintained the same number of employees, the same legacy system, and the same processes since 40 years ago, really. So we really reached a tipping point where we couldn't really function as easily and react to the market as quickly. We work with companies like Tesla and TomTom where we really need to have that information readily accessible. And we also wanted to move forward, like you explained, Matt, with things involving machine learning and the Internet of Things. So we had to position ourselves as a company to be able to respond to the changing world right now. And so luckily we were able to pull Jacob into the fold, who will speak in a few minutes. And luckily, he's also up for really big challenges and time-consuming work. So I'll turn it over to him so he can explain the project to you.
Thanks, Samantha. So as Samantha mentioned, I was hired in large part to focus on our data systems and kind of getting things in the best order they can be. So that is kind of the impetus of how we were introduced to Trifecta initially. So we're currently operating a legacy ERP system, and it's actually hosted in a version of Unix. And we're planning to move to Microsoft Dynamics 365, but we're not sure of the timeline yet. We're still kind of working that out, the details. And so we've got this gap between a legacy system that has served us well for many years and where we'd like to get to, where our ERP system can be more powerful, but we still need the business to function and accelerate and grow during that time. So that's where we started to look at different options for handling that. So our starting state is, like I said, a SCO Unix system, and we access it with a terminal emulator. I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with those, but it looks kind of like this little screenshot here. And the data files, it doesn't have a database in its background, so it actually stores the data in flat files in a proprietary format called mkeyed. And then versions of data that, when things change, things are not versioned or dated. So we don't have a history of, what it used to be, that kind of thing. And that's posed challenges for us because we want to say, okay, well, we're selling something for X amount now, or it cost us X amount today. What was it last week or last month or last year? And without looking at old reports, it's very difficult to do that in the system itself. And just to give you an example of the file format here, I've done ETL work for many years, and it's one of the more challenging file formats I've come across. If you see here, this is like a snapshot of one of the files, and this is just a cross-reference between a code and like a category code and a type of customer. So if you see the kind of purpley blue characters, the @ symbols, that's actually binary data that's separating the records. So line 1 and 2 is a single record, and it's saying that the number 1 means tow distributor, and then line 3 and 4 says the number 2 means tow OEM. So this is a real challenge to figure out how to get this data essentially into Excel or spreadsheet format, or even better into like a BI tool. And here's another file example here. So this is like an example customer, and we've got on line 4885, there's I think 6 or 7 fields on that same line. And then I'm trying to see if there's another good example. Yeah, so like line 4887, that's a Julian date, which uses a old reference point of like the reign of Julius Caesar or something like that. But it's similar to Unix epoch time, but it was I think used in astronomy and prior to Unix being implemented a lot. But so we've got some really tricky things to convert and to get information out of, like multi-line records, and actually the records are not always the same length either, so it's not like a fixed width format, inconsistent separators, things like that, and then sometimes the fields will span multiple lines. So it was a real challenge to, when I first saw the format, to think of how we're going to information in an efficient manner. And then on the reporting side, most of the reports out of the system are generated into PDFs, which are equally or almost equally difficult to make useful. So on this example, we've got each record is 2 different lines, and the columns don't quite align up, and sometimes the columns overlap. And that was just really tricky to get, if you've got a report that's got 10,000 lines on it or 10,000 records, how do you even go through that? We're so used to using Excel or BI tools or things like that now that it was really challenging. And some people were, for a few critical reports going line by line when they needed to. But so that was kind of on the reporting side, like we were really having trouble just getting information from one end to the other out of the system. And then we also have some auxiliary data systems, Excel, WordPress, and they're not connected. They don't connect to our core system, and they don't connect to each other. So getting all of that information kind of in one place has been a challenge as well. So when I first started to tackle this problem, I was building Python tools, so just like Python CLIs that could convert either the PDF reports initially, and then I went kind of to the source and started working on converting the mkeyed files. And then one of the other challenges that we had was we were still sharing files primarily through email, which if you hit a certain size limit, it makes it difficult, and then it's also difficult to go find something that you shared, 3 months ago. So yeah, this example like of the CLI interface, it was really difficult. I created the CLI and it was relatively easy for me to run it to convert some files or extract data, but it wasn't something that I could easily hand off to an end user and say, hey, you wanted that report, here's the CLI, go for it. So that was not a good long-term solution for us. And yeah, so bottlenecked with just me, and then it also took a good amount of time to develop, and the code quality was starting to get problematic. So it was really promising that as Samantha and I started to deliver more information and better quality information to the different departments and end users at BA, they were asking for more. So every time we gave them one thing, they asked for 2 more things. So we could really tell that there was a demand, and the demand was growing based on what was available, but that meant that I was often really rushing to get those projects out the door, and therefore they were less maintainable in the long term. And it hinged on my expertise, which isn't really good for business continuity. I always try to operate by the quote-unquote hit by a bus principle, which is really just about durability and redundancy, but you never wanted to have a single point of failure for any of your critical systems. So we decided we really needed to take a new approach as the demand was increasing, and as we were finding that, we still had tons of data sources we needed to incorporate. So I did a survey of the industry and talked to different people, and just signed up for probably 40 trials of different programs or systems and things like that. So like relative to data preparation, like I took a look at Talend and Fivetran, Upsolver, Tidco, Panoply, AWS's Glue, Stitch Data. I mean, that's just a short list. I put together like a spreadsheet that just was like, here's, 60 different offerings at some point in this field. And then I tried probably about 20 of them, hands-on that I narrowed down. And we ended up settling on Trifecta for the data preparation side. And I'll get more about why in a little bit. But we wanted to, our kind of goals were to remove bottlenecks and reduce, again, that business continuity, like reduce the kind of hang-ups on a single person or single type of expertise. So when we set out to do the project, I always like to do a requirements constraint. And here, I'm not going to go over individually each item, but essentially we're looking to hit upon each of these requirements as features that we needed or functionality that we, absolutely had to have. There wasn't like a like to have, it was just a yes or no sort of thing. One of the big pieces was we wanted to easily incorporate new data sources, and we wanted to keep our information up to date and keep a history of changes. And then constraints-wise, initially we had a, less than $10,000 cap for just get a proof of concept together to see if we could get something working, and before we could even ask for an additional, whatever it might cost to complete the project. It's primarily myself, so we only have one FTE working on it, and we had some relatively skeptical stakeholders that were not so sure that this crazy idea about putting together quote-unquote data infrastructure would be good for the business, especially if it had a large price tag. So we wanted to make sure that we were delivering value, within about 3 months, that we could show to those stakeholders so that they would buy in and then support and further the project, assuming it was successful. And then the organization has mixed levels of technical maturity and data maturity. So, we couldn't have a system, or we couldn't put together a system that was all, Python CLIs. Like, we would have to have something that would be usable and maintainable by people who have basic familiarity with running a Windows computer and Office applications and a web browser, but maybe nothing more advanced than that. And then we kind of had a stretch goal of delivering 80% of the total value within 9 months. That was our goal to reach. So then, based on those requirements and constraints, we came to these key deliverables. And an important note about this is, like I say, we had some very skeptical stakeholders. So we needed to make sure that we were putting together something that if they decided they didn't want to do steps 3, 4, and 5, we were still getting value and getting good use out of steps 1, 2, and 3. So we kind of put together a framework of how we wanted to build this infrastructure as a company. So we started with data collaboration tools, and then to data pipelines, data lake, and then we went to data preparation, data warehouse, BI reporting, and end user training, which kind of mainly was revolving around the BI and reporting tools. For ROI, we used estimated time. So our time savings was the key. We were considering hiring an additional employee and comparing that to the cost of the infrastructure. We found that we could get better results with less money by building the right infrastructure versus hiring somebody. So the data collaboration tools, this is really our foundational piece. And it's because, if we're going to start collecting information or putting information together, we're going to have to be talking to the subject area experts about what does this mean, what does, can you find this additional information, I can't find it, all of that piece, and then sharing files back and forth. So really, we use Trello and the G Suite tools and Slack to improve for company-wide the communication and documentation and project management. And that really made a solid foundation for us to kind of do anything else. So again, talking about kind of building on that value, if we knew if we did this step and nothing else, then we would have achieved value for the organization, that we could, demonstrable value. So the next piece, data pipelines. So this is, okay, we've got some basic stuff in place. Now we need to start moving all the information into, a data lake or something like that, or even a data warehouse. We weren't quite sure what architecture we were going to use initially, so we left it open. but we knew we had to get information from all of our different sources. So what we decided to do was use the simplest approach for each source, and then basically take a kind of many-to-one approach where whatever connectors worked best for a data source, that's the connector or tool we would use. And then the main idea was that as long as that connector could put it in a common format or send it via a common method. So we used all of these in some level, but we didn't do anything too advanced to go in too deep. Like, I think the tool that I wrote to like move data from our legacy ERP maybe had 200 or 300 lines of code. Like, it was very simple. And then the AWS Lambda, so that moves things between our S3 buckets and stuff like that, and from Trifecta to S3 and back and forth, because we segregate our data based on if it's raw or if it's been staged or prepared. So that, I think the Lambda code maybe 200 lines, something like that. So none of these we went really in depth with. And the other piece was the modularity. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't investing too much in a single kind of stack and just spending, we knew things were going to change. We weren't going to always use our legacy ERP. Our auxiliary systems, change with a certain frequency. So we didn't want to invest too much time and effort in any one piece relative to a specific data source. We just want to make sure what was the quickest, most efficient way we could get the data to a common area. In that common area, we used AWS, S3, and Glacier to create a data lake. Reliability was really important, security and encryption. When setting up the data lake, it took about 2 weeks to kind of get all the settings and the configuration set up the way we wanted. And we could have done it in one, but we really went the extra mile on security and encryption and going over things and reading through best practices. And I think that I just want to emphasize that's really important, that once you've made data more available and easier to use, then it becomes a higher security risk. So the easier your data is to use, the more you need to lock it down. If you've got binary data sitting somewhere, it's going to be pretty hard for somebody malicious to use it. But if you've got data that's all cleaned up and analyzed, then it's really easy for someone to, inadvertently even use it inappropriately. So the data preparation tool, this was one that we were really not sure which direction we were going to go on at first. But like I say, so I spent a lot of time trying out different tools, and we had a few kind of requirements. So we had those mkeyed files, which were challenging for pretty much every data prep tool. There wasn't really a tool that could handle those super elegantly out of the box without some amount of additional effort, especially compared to like a CSV or a fixed width file, things like that. So we had to be able to handle the complex transformations, wanted to make sure it was scalable so that we could, if we switched, part of the idea of that business continuity was we wanted to start building this infrastructure that if we changed ERP systems or if we changed something on our end, that we wouldn't have to change our whole infrastructure. We'd have that kind of commonality. So we really wanted a very solid multi-purpose tool. And I talked to a lot of salespeople, and I would say, well, I've got this kind of file, this kind of file, this kind of file, and I couldn't really describe the mkeyed file, so I'd show it to them. And I would say 5 out of 10 would say, no, we can't do all of that, we can do some. And then another 5 out of 10 would say, yes, we can do all of that. And then when I actually got into the tools and tried them out, I found out that very few of them could do all of it or couldn't do it elegantly. So I think it's really important to spend some time testing out different tools because they are suited to different, types of file structures or different types of operations. They're not specific to, there's no tool that can do everything. But we settled on Trifecta because it really fit all of our kind of core needs, but then it was also very easy to use. I told pretty much everyone I know about Trifecta, and I think I even called my girlfriend really excited when I had finally gotten in it and tested it, because it was a really exceptional tool that was significantly more advanced than all of the others. So anyway, not to dwell on that too much, but I really enjoy using Trifecta, and it does things that I would hope somebody would figure out how to do, but then I don't have to build that tool myself. So it's really nice to have a tool that I kind of would have envisioned, but already pre-built and able to use. And then the data warehouse, we wanted to keep it pretty simple. We don't have a huge volume of data. We mainly have a huge variety of data. So we were able to use a MySQL database, just an Amazon Aurora serverless that auto-scales up and down based on usage. And we wanted to have something in SQL just because, or SQL compatible like Redshift or BigQuery, that we wouldn't have to learn a new specialized language or a new set of tools. There's so many good resources out there for SQL already, so that was a good standard for us to use. And we use our data warehouse for storing the clean data, for reference data, and then also doing most of our joins and views and combining the different data sets and things like that. And the last piece was the BI reporting tools. And this is another one that we really got excited about trying a bunch of different tools out. But then kind of necessity got to us where we really needed to, we have all this information, we've collected it, we've got it cleaned up. You know, now when people are asking me for reports, it's taking me 10 minutes, not an hour to get it to them, things like that. So we really want to push that on to self-service and have end users, if they wanted information, they could go get it themselves if they had the right permissions, that kind of thing. And I came across this tool, Metabase. I was working with a developer at Insider, the other organization I work with, and he recommended I try it out because he had worked on it a while back. And it seemed at first to be like overly simplistic, but it ended up being a really good first step into BI for us because, again, it's very user-friendly, straightforward, and it does some complex things with some visualizations and whatnot, but it also is really approachable for somebody who isn't an advanced data analyst or something like that. So we found that was a good fit. But again, back to having that SQL base, Samantha and I also use Tableau. I do some work in Python and R on data analysis. And we had this goal of getting to AI and machine learning with some of our data sets. And we're able to do that a little bit kind of ad hoc, like if we have a question we're trying to answer, but we wanted to get it into the normal everyday flow. And so it's having something like SQL as a basis, we can pretty much connect any BI reporting tool. And again, like the preparation tools, the variety is immense. It keeps growing. And they're often, they have specialties. So each kind of tool is specialized for X, Y, and Z. Even if they don't advertise it, they just happen to be best at a certain user type or a certain audience or a certain type of data, that kind of thing. So we still have the door open on this one because we're probably going to add a few more tools to our list. So just to go over, after we got that in place, we met all of our requirements with the tools that I've mentioned, and we hit all of our constraints. And the only thing that changed was we decided to focus more on the ERP project as opposed to adding new BI tools and getting into the machine learning as a day-to-day process because the priorities of the business changed. So because we built on a foundation and then kind of layer upon layer, it really made it a lot easier for us to, shift gears and not lose anything, not feel like, oh, we lost out on finishing our project because we had already planned to, you know, shift gears if we needed to and still get some value out of the overall process. Yeah, Samantha, do you have anything you want to add on kind of on that?
I would just say, just to reiterate what you've already said, taking all of these steps really positioned us very well for, you know, moving forward with a cloud-based ERP system. And, you know, as far as being user-friendly, just to emphasize that as well, having all of these tools and making sure they were user-friendly for anyone that was using them within our company was extremely important. And I know Jacob already said that, but the ones that we chose were, I really feel like they were the most user-friendly. We even have people that have retired from our company, but they're still consulting with us. And so they're accessing these tools. They're in their 60s, late 60s, some of them, and they're doing great with all of these tools, the ones that they're touching. So that was really surprising and beneficial for us. That's all I'll add, though.
Yeah, I'll jump on that one too. Yeah, that was the other thing. You know, at first again, we had this resistance internally about, is what you're doing or is this project going to show value or is it going to be useful to us? And probably about maybe 1 or 2 months ago, we really hit a tipping point where instead of us pushing, hey, you know, can you start using Google Docs to do X, Y, and Z, or can you start, you know, pulling this from this system, that kind of thing, it's flipped around. So now the users are saying, hey, can you get this person signed up for a Google Drive account, or can you get this person a Metabase login? So that's been really exciting to see that happen. Yeah, so with that, I'll hand it back to Matt.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you, Jacob and Samantha. I think that resonates with a lot of people who are going through a lot of the same trials and tribulations related to data, and it's great to have like an actual success story of going from a legacy system to more modernized technology that benefits everyone within the organization. And I think I'm going to go into a demo, but maybe before we do that, we'll just ask one more polling question. Are you currently using legacy platforms for data and reporting within your organization? And feel free to just go ahead again and click on the screen, and as soon as we get some answers, we'll move on to the demo portion, which I'm sure everybody's most excited to see. And I know we want to leave some time for questions, so I will try to go through the demo pretty quick. I think you'll get a good idea of what Trifecta can do in just a couple minutes. All right, so over half the audience so far is using legacy platforms. And maybe during some of the question portions, oh wow, it's really jumping up now. Maybe during some of the questions we'll learn a little bit about what those are. All right, well, I will get into the demo really quick. Okay, so this is the Trifecta interface, and I'll just go over a couple quick things that are important to note in the UI. So to the left here, you'll notice these icons indicate the source data. So this could be from anywhere. This could be from a flat Excel file. This could be from AWS, an S3 bucket, or a Hadoop file system, a table, anything that you can establish a connection to. This is representative of the source data. And then this is your recipe. So this is where you're going to write the logic that transforms your data. So when I click on the recipe, you can see I haven't done anything to this recipe yet. So if I double click on it, it's going to go into the Trifecta grid. And this is where you actually profile and transform your data. You can see that it is a grid-like interface. And just to give a little bit of context around the data that we see here, so this is a fake inventory report that I built that is representative of data I used to work with at Pepsi. That's pretty messy and took a lot of effort in our legacy systems like Excel and Access to be able to pull out some of the key data points. And one of the things that Jacob mentioned is, like, you know, being able to establish patterns, even though there's not a defined necessarily set like pattern structure within the data, can be pretty challenging within traditional like coding or legacy systems, or even something as simple as Excel. So real quick, before I get into some of the functionalities, right up here at the top, all of the potential functions that are available in Trifecta are in this header right here. So if you are familiar with working with things like Excel, everything's discoverable. So you don't have to go and Google functions or like remember a coding language. Everything is within the UI. One thing I'm going to do real quick is just to show you some of the functionality. So you can see here that everything's embedded in text in this data. And we've got an item number along with the item description in this column, and then we have a delimiter. So all I'm going to do is interact with the data and highlight this delimiter, and you'll see this is where the machine learning suggestions come into play. So to the right, Trifecta actually tries to infer what I'm trying to do with the data based on what I selected. And as you hover over all of these suggestions, you get a real-time preview of what that will do. So if you think in terms of traditional code, you have to write your code, run the data at scale, and see if your code worked. Right here, you're getting a real-time preview that you can switch between to see if what you're doing is what you want to implement into the recipe. So as I click through, you can see the preview update. And this is exactly what I want, is these two columns split between the two differentiators. So I'll add this to my recipe. And now you'll see this column has been split, and I have a step in my recipe that's natural language that says split item on delimiters matching delimiter plus white space. This is proprietary pattern matching code within Trifecta, so there is a little bit of coding language, but it's designed to be natural language as well. And it's similar to Java, and they all have readable names and descriptions. So you can actually search these functions if you're trying to match a pattern. Quickly, I'm just going to rename this column. So if I click the drop-down menu for the column, I get all these options as well. If I select a simple rename, I'm just going to name the column, I'll say UPC code. And I'll do another quick showcase of the pattern or profiling of the data. So you can see you've got green values in this data quality bar. Those indicate valid values that match the specified data type. So Trifecta has two options. You can either infer the data type, which it'll do automatically, which is great for flat files, or it can use the structure of the table you're using. And these are all the values that match a integer. There's a black bar that indicates missing or null values, and then a red bar that shows mismatch values. So I can see what those are, and it's because there is a delimiter. If I highlight that, I can just replace the delimiter with nothing, and it'll fix the, you can see preview it, it'll fix those values to be consistent with an integer value. And finally, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just do a basic join where I'm going to take this data that comes from the customer and combine it with a reference file that gives me all of the parameters about this data that I'm seeing. If I go up here and I go to the join interface, Trifecta shows me the data sets that are available in this flow. So there's an item reference file. I'm going to select this. It gives me a preview of the data set. And then it automatically will infer the most logical match between these two data sets. So it's done it correctly. It defaults to an inner join, but you have all of these options here as well: inner, right, left, outer, and cross join. And then it inferred the correct key between these two, which is UPC code and Quickie-Mart item number. And you can edit this as well. You can manually match the keys if for some reason Trifecta does not infer it correctly. It also gives you a percentage match as well. There's a 76% match between these two data sets. I'm going to click next, and then I can actually choose from what columns I want to keep in this data set. So I'm just going to keep these two key columns. I'll keep the total on hand, the due date, and then you can see I can add from my right file. So the business unit, the brand and description, and you can see I get a real-time preview of the master data set that I'm creating from these two data sets. I'll click add to recipe. And now this is my total recipe that I've created from these two data sets. And if I go back out into the flow view, you can see now how these two data sets flow together into this this final output, which then I can generate as a file. I can publish back to a relational source. I can write to a table or somewhere else, and then schedule this to run on a consistent basis. And that is a just quick demo. Like I said, you can go to trifectacom and actually try this out for yourself. But with that, I will turn it back over to the moderator to get to the questions.
Well, Jacob, Samantha, and Matt, thanks for that excellent presentation. We'll get started with today's Q&A session, and I want to thank the audience for their participation. We have a great many questions that have come in during the presentation, and we'll do our best to get through all of them in the remaining time. During this Q&A session, I will leave up this contact screen with information for Jacob, Samantha, and Matt if you'd like to contact them for a copy of the slide deck following today's webinar. Let's get started. The first question I have is, what are the typical analytics use cases Trifecta addresses?
Yes, there's a lot of use cases that we come across. I would say if we bucketed them into three, it would be, one would be data onboarding. So you're receiving data from multiple sources, possibly different vendors, and you need to standardize them into a format to be able to run analytics or put into a downstream dashboard. That's one. The other one, which is closely related or maybe in parallel, is this concept of like for preparing the data for modeling and cleaning it up to go run against algorithms in a model. And then the final piece would be going like any data you have that's run on a consistent regular basis, like if you're getting batch loads or things like that, and you have to process a workflow on a consistent basis into a downstream reporting system for others to consume. Those are probably like the three buckets that we typically run into, which are kind of common across a lot of organizations where they run into scenarios where they have to clean and prepare data for that downstream consumption.
Matt, I'll add to that too. if you don't mind. So the one thing I would say Trifecta does not do is live data, but we needed to have near live data. So we schedule things to run like every 10 minutes for things that change frequently. And that was suitable for us because the delay of 10 minutes was, close enough to live.
And we do have partners too. Oh, so I was just going to say there is partners that can be leveraged as well that will handle the streaming portion of that if that is a requirement of yours.
All right, thank you both for that clarification. The next question I have is for Jacob. Earlier in the presentation, you gave an example where you calculated your ROI. How exactly did you calculate that figure?
Yeah, so we just used estimated time. So we said if it takes, 4 hours to create a report and, it takes maybe 40 or 60 hours to develop a process to automate that report, and then people use that report once a week or, once a month, we just multiplied those estimated hours times a dollar amount. So it wasn't, exact to the cent, but we were dealing with numbers that were in the 50 to 100,000 range for different things. So roughly, it was a good estimator for us.
Also, the demand was high enough where, as Jacob explained before, we were about to hire someone else, or we were thinking about it. And our company's in Maryland. It's a high cost of living area. So the salary that we would have to include actually was higher than all of these applications or softwares put together.
Well, Jacob, Samantha, and Matt, thank you. Some great answers to some very good questions. For those of you that asked questions that weren't answered today, we will be sending all unanswered questions to Jacob, Samantha, Matt, and the Trifecta team, so they can follow up with you after today's webinar. I have just a few quick announcements. Please mark your calendars for September the 12th, 2019, and our next DSC webinar, How to Use Time Series Data to Forecast at Scale. Also, today's taping will be available for on-demand viewing later today and can be found on the homepage of Data Science Central in the Webinar tab, located at the top of the page. And past webinars are available on demand at datasciencecentral.com. If you haven't had the opportunity to view them, I encourage you to take a look. They provide very useful insight into a wide variety of topics of interest to our data science community. This brings today's webinar to a close. I'd like to thank our audience for their attendance and thoughtful questions. And a special thanks again today to Trifecta for their sponsorship, as well as to our speakers today, Jacob Joseph, Samantha Winters, and Matt Durda, for their insight into today's topic. My name is Stephanie Glenn, and I am very pleased to have been your host for today's event. I look forward to seeing you all again on September the 12th, 2019. Have a great day.